again, we're going to finish up chapter 9 with the last freedoms here, talking about the freedom of assembly and your freedom of petition. Okay. Now, I know section 3 had a ton of definitions in it, like libel, slander, things of that nature. Everybody got those, right? Okay. So, today we're basically going to talk about two basic purposes that serve by the guarantees of free expression. We have the right to do what we're doing right now. We are assembled right now. Okay. We're going to talk about how the Supreme Court has limited seditious speech and obscenity, basically slander and libel and all that stuff. We're going to talk about prior restraint, meaning they're trying to stop something before it occurs, making a law before it occurs. And then talk a little bit about symbolic and commercial speech. Okay, so I've opened up the wrong. That's not the wrong one. We could use that one, but it's not the one I need right now. All right, so just like everything, there is a couple of definitions that we're going to put down. If you notice at the bottom of your paper, you only have 3 of them. The first one there is the word assemble, common sense. When we assemble, what are we doing, guys? We're gathering as a what? Group. So simply put, beside of the word assemble, to gather with one another. Okay? Obviously, that's kind of being frowned upon these days, but your First Amendment freedom gives you the right to do that. Which brings me to a really good point. Can the government ban you from gathering with other people?
Yes.
No, they can't. You have your First Amendment freedom guarantees you have that right. Now, can they put limitations on it? Yes. Is that what they have done?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So, assemble means to simply gather in groups. Okay? The next one we don't have to write down. I am going to touch base with you, though, where it says civil disobedience. Guys, if you're disobeying something, then obviously you're violating a law intentionally, but in a nonviolent way, okay? Basically, you can protest to do this. You can assemble to protest to do this, but you're doing it in a nonviolent way, all right? You're not... Think about civil rights movement. Think about Martin Luther King. He done all his in a nonviolent manner, or tried to, right? He didn't try to break any law. So that's civil disobedience. That's not on there. Just thought I'd throw it out there at you. The next one, content neutral. This one you're going to see quite, I think 3 or 4 times on your test with this chapter. But the word content neutral, according to your book, says it's a requirement that allows the government to regulate assemblies based on time, place, and manner, but not on the basis of what might be said. So we need to shorten that up, okay? Put down that the government can regulate time, place, and manner. They can regulate when you do something, they can regulate where you do it, and they can regulate how you do it. You got me?
Yeah.
But they cannot regulate what might be said. Okay? You guys believe this or not, but we actually had a KKK parade in Hillsville not too far, very long ago. Like in the 70s or 80s. Now, could our local government stop them from having a march? No. Now, they can regulate when they can do it. They may say, okay, yeah, you can have your parade. You're going to do it from 1 to 1:15 on a Tuesday. And you're going to you got to be out of there. Now, can they regulate all that? Yeah. But they cannot, you can't tell them no simply because of what it might be said. All right? So they can regulate place, time, and manner. But the government cannot regulate what is being said. Is everybody with me there? So that is content neutral. That is important. Hey, you remember when we had the KKK parade here?
Yeah.
You remember what year? That's what I'm getting at.
Oh, God.
It was in the 80s or 90s?
Early.
Maybe in the late 70s, I don't know. But anyway, they were allowed to do it because, you can't forbid people from marching. That's their freedom of assembly, their freedom of petition. But you can control time, place, and manner. Okay? And then the last one you got here is guarantee of association. Your book puts it a little different. They call it the right of association. Basically, guys, you have the right to join others to promote political, economic, and social causes. And I don't really know how to shorten that one, but you can have the right to associate with others to promote whatever cause it is that you want to promote. Okay? Everybody with me there? Yeah. Content neutral is the one that's important on this end. All right. So far so simple? Yes. All right. Now, you don't have to write this part down, but we're going to move up to the top. But just to give you an idea, it says, how has the Supreme Court ruled on assembly and petition cases? You got to remember, these are not absolute freedoms. They have limitations to them. All right? It says, in general, the court protects the right of peaceful assemblies and petitions. What do you think they mean by peaceful here? As long as we're not arguing, fighting, things of that nature, we can gather all we want to, right? But if you gather and disobedience starts occurring and violence happens, then they try to break up the assembly, right? So you can gather peacefully, you can petition peacefully, okay? It says the government has the right to set rules on how, when, and where assemblies can take place. I just kind of showed you that with the march we talked about that happened in Hillsville. Not so many years ago, but it was quite a while. You know, it was in the 80s, 90s, you know, late 80s, early, somewhere in there. Okay, you guys weren't around, and I was small enough to not remember it. Okay, so they can limit or put a restriction on time, place, and manner. Okay, and then it says people do not have the right to trespass or to assemble or petition on private property. Okay, now that's a big one, because if someone owns property and they're trespassing, can they press charges? Yeah, okay, simple enough. So, let's move up here to the top of your paper, and basically it's just fill in the blank. And hopefully this is pretty easy, self-evident. I'm going to kind of start it, and we'll go through the top as we go. We'll go through the notes as we go through the top of this. So, number one there, it says the blank amendment guarantees the right of people to do things peacefully and to petition the government. So, which amendment have we been talking about for the last week? Please tell me y'all know. Huh? We did talk about the 9th. We did talk about the 14th. But which one is your Freedom Amendment? The first. So put down the First Amendment. Guarantees the right to people to do what peacefully? When we gather, that is called what? To assemble. All right? And to petition the government for. Now this one you may not know. Number 3 says to redress grievances. You guys remember the definition for the word redress? If you get redressed in court, that is to satisfy a claim. That means whatever the verdict was has been paid off, your community service was done, you've done your jail time. Redress is a satisfaction of a claim. So it's taken care of. So, and to petition the government for redress, we want them to fix something for us. Okay? Now, number 4 is dealing with what Will was just talking about. It says, which amendment extends this protection to states and local governments? Which amendment is our due process clause? Y'all remember that one? The 14th. So number 4 is the 14th. Okay, and it kind of goes down through your notes here. Y'all see it, the 14th Amendment. Due process clause extends these rights to citizens of every state. All right? It says, however, the court has allowed governments to place reasonable limits on these rights in the form of, now we just talked about this, what can the government put a restriction on when it comes to assembling? Time, what time we can do it, place we can do it, and the manner in which we do it. So number 5 is time, place, and manner. Now, can the government put a restriction on what is being protested? No, but they can put a restriction on the time we do it, the places we do it, and the manner we do it. All right, so number 5 is time, place, and manner. And then your note says the Constitution does not protect assemblies or petitions that endanger life, property, or public safety. This is common sense stuff, guys. Someone gets hurt during a petition, there's going to be some issues. All right? Now, looking back at your notes, we've got through 5 so far, right? All right, well, I'm going to go back to your notes. It says assemblies include public demonstrations as well as organizations such as political parties and interest groups. So this is where the most of these come from. Okay, it's through interest groups, through political parties, trying to get their way of thinking pushed across to the agenda of the government. Okay? It says petitions can include letters, lobbying, and advertisements. Now it's important for you guys to understand the difference between an assembly protest and a petition protest. If we are assembling to protest, what are we doing? We're actually going in person and protesting something we don't like. You guys understand that? Now, if we protest through a petition, what is the only thing we're doing? We're signing our name to a document or suggesting something in a document that we don't like, and we're sending it to the government to let them know. You guys understand that? So there is a difference. It says peaceful marches and parades are protected forms of assembly. So as long as everything is what, guys? Peaceful, there will be no issues. All right? Now, we already talked about civil disobedience, so jump back over here to your notes. It says, for example, parades cannot be held near a courthouse when court is in session if they are what? Now, let's think about this. If court is in session, can I go protest outside of a courtroom? I can't. I could, right? But one of these limitations stick in. It's where the government's not going to allow me to do that. I'm not going to be able to go around the block, around this courthouse, trying to persuade the outcome of this court decision. Does that make sense? A great example of this is Michael Vick. Y'all remember who Michael Vick is? What did he get in trouble for? Dog fighting. Every single day that dude walked into that courtroom, there was people lined up outside screaming and yelling at him. Now they made him stay back. They didn't let him march around the courthouse and yell obscenities, but when he came in, they let him have it. Do you think that affected the outcome of that court case? Do you think that judge probably was like, hey, there's a lot of people out here that don't like what this guy did, and I probably need to punish him pretty severely for it? Do you think they had any kind of influence on what he decided to do? I'm sure it did. Okay, I'm sure it did. I'm not going to try to leave a courtroom and 1,000 people be mad at me because I didn't punish someone who they thought deserved it, right? So, number 6, it says parades cannot be held near a courthouse when court is in session if they are, put down, intended to influence the outcome. That is number 6, intended to influence the outcome. They just simply don't allow it, okay? All right, and if you notice in your notes, this is what we're just kind of talking about. It says the government can decide when, where, and how assemblies can take place in order to keep the public peace. And then the next one, it says government rules must be specific and fairly administered. So with that being said, look at number 7. It says government regulations of the right of assembly must be precisely drawn and, put down, fairly administered. What do you think it means by that? That the same rules apply to who? Everybody, regardless of the parade or the protest. All of the rules and regulations have to be fairly administered, and that is number 7. And then number 8 and number 9 is exactly what we've been saying this whole time. It says, in addition, while the government can regulate assembly on a basis of, that is the same as number 5, they can regulate time, they can regulate place, and they can regulate manner, okay? The government cannot regulate the basis of, and number 9 is what is said. And that's literally right here, okay? This is the content neutral I'm talking about. The government rules must also be content neutral. And number 8, they can control time, place, or manner. But in number 9, the government cannot control what is being said. If you want to go criticize the government, you have the right to do that. As long as your protest or your assembly doesn't turn violent, you can do it. Does that make sense? Now, in that next little section there, it's talking about where most of these demonstrations take place. And if you'll notice in your notes, it's talking about public demonstrations. All right? It says most demonstrations take place in public places because, what are we trying to do with this? People protest because they're trying to influence who? The public, right? They're trying to change their train of thought or make them think the same way they do. So number 10, put down that they take place in public places because they try to influence the public. These assemblies and petitions are trying to influence the public. Now, since they're done in public, guys, and if you'll notice in your notes, it says they tend to take place in public places like streets, sidewalks, parks, public buildings. Well, if I'm going to go marching with 30 of my friends down Main Street, do you think it would be in my best interest to let the local government or whoever know that I'm going to do that? Because I have the right to do it, but if they don't know about it, do they have to stop traffic or do anything to help me with my parade? No. Most of the time, if you want to protest something, you have to get a permit, okay? So if you notice, it says the Supreme Court thus allows governments to require advance notice and permits for demonstrations on public property. So you guys remember we had the Black Lives Matter march, a couple months ago, I guess? That was pre-planned. The local government had to know, like, hey, this is where we're marching from, this is where we're marching to, this is what we're going to do. They didn't care what was being said. They just needed time, place, and manner so they could set aside that time so nobody would get hurt. Does that make sense? So, no, it says, however, the court has held that it is permissible for the government to require demonstrators to give. Number 11 is advance notice, which is right here. And then in number 12, it is permits and require permits. So you have to get advance notice. Hey, man.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah.
Nothing, talking about a little speech or a petition in assembly. All right, so number 11 is you have to give advance notice when you do these things, and number 12 is you have to get permits when you want to do them, okay? And yes, if you want to do it in Carroll County, they do ask that you get a permit and to give advance notice, okay? Now, the next little part here is talking about one little court case we got, and it's actually in your notes. It's talking about Gregory versus Chicago in 1969. So before we go into trying to answer those, let's kind of talk about what happened. So you got a group who marched from Chicago City Hall to the mayor's house to protest segregation in the city schools. So what's the first problem with this? They marched from City Hall, which is fine, right? To whose house? Is that public or private property? That's private property. Now, can you have a petition or protest on private property? You could, as long as the people don't press charges on you for trespassing, right? But if I'm the mayor and people stand in my yard yelling at me, what am I probably going to do? I'm going to get them out of there. I'm going to call the cops, right? I don't want to hear it, okay? So, it says a crowd of several hundred bystanders gathered to protest against and throw objects at the marchers. So you had another group of people come in that didn't like what was being protested, so they start throwing things at the march. It says the police, fearing violence, arrested the marchers for disorderly conduct when they refused to leave. The court ruled that the violent bystanders, not the peaceful marchers, were disturbing the peace. So, basically, if two groups come together and one of them starts an issue, they got to figure out who started it. Y'all with me? So, it says, in case of the Gregory versus Chicago, the court held that demonstrators cannot be charged with disorderly conduct as long as they act how? Peacefully. Number 13, act peacefully. Even if their actions lead to, and number 14 is disorder. So as long as you are peaceful, and even though your actions may lead to people fighting, arguing, whatever, as long as you don't help provoke it by initiating it, but remaining peaceful, then you're fine. Okay? And then the last one here, number 5, or not the last one, but the next one says, in most recent years, cases have focused on demonstrations around what? Now, this one's pretty touchy. What's one of the biggest issues that surrounds politics or that separate the Republicans and Democrats? It's the abortion laws, right? So, in most years, cases have focused on demonstrations. At number 15, this is at abortion clinics. A lot of people protest at abortion clinics. They don't like it, okay? So, number 15 is that. The court that has held that local ordinance can require a buzzer zone to avoid blocking access to them. So, basically, if you're going to protest an abortion clinic, you have to stay far enough back so you don't allow people to not be able to get in. They have to be able to get in if they want to go in, okay? And then, demonstrations on what, such as shopping malls, are viewed differently by the court. If you protest on public property, are you good to go?
Yeah.
If you protest on private property, can it be an issue? Yes. So number 16, demonstrations on private property are viewed differently by the court. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that, if I can get down here. It says people do not have right to assemble or petition on private property without permission. You can't just go to a shopping mall or the mayor's house or the president's lawn and protest him without permission. You have to have the right to be on their property. No one has the absolute constitutional right to hand out leaflets or ask for petition signatures in a shopping mall. You can't do that, okay? Now, could I possibly ask for them out in a parking area across the street from a shopping mall? Yeah, because that's public. Does that make sense? All dealing with private here. So, the court has ruled that state Supreme Courts may interpret state constitutions in such a way too. Now, number 17 is kind of lengthy, but I'm going to shorten it down for you. It says the courts can rule that shopping center owners should give permission for the reasonable exercise of the right to petition. So what this is saying is this, that the federal court system has allowed the state Supreme Court to interpret state constitutions in such a way that they can have reasonable exercise of petition on private property. So basically this is what they're saying. As long as they think it will not cause violence, then they can do it. Then you get permission. But the private property owners have the ability to tell them no. Does everybody understand that? So number 17, reasonable exercise of the right of petition on private property. Okay? Now, that is it as far as chapter 19 goes. Okay? So here's what we're going to do next.